Hi, I'm a trans woman, and if you don't know what that is, it's kind of like being a substitute teacher of womanhood. I'm the woman until the real woman shows up, and I'm at my #1 favorite gay cruising spot in New York City, the 9/11 Memorial, and today I'm going to talk to you about what 9/11 has to do with transness. By the way, I'm Amber, like the alert, and I'm the only good tour guide in New York City, and if TikTok's really going away, this is my second to last video essay before my series finale, so let's put the biscuit in the basket, kids. The character in all of fiction that I relate to the most is the gangster Phil Leotardo from the HBO Prestige series, The Sopranos. Strong characters have strong motivations, and this dude's entire thing was driven by this vindictive, aggrieved sense of entitlement that was justified. It's not mentioned in the show a lot, but he did 20 years in the can on behalf of his family. And not only that, but after he got out, his brother was murdered by that animal Tony Bludetto. Yet in spite of this, he was constantly sidelined, told to wait his turn and to play by the rules. This entitlement became this festering pit of bitterness where he just couldn't forget it, kid. It's Chinatown. I relate to Phil Leotardo a lot as a trans woman who's lived a very rough life. Like, I think what people don't understand about later transitioning trans women is that, like, as a trans woman in my late 30s, I didn't live to this point in my life, but I survived. Like, I used to be homeless, and that's not even the top 5 worst things that ever happened to me. And so I look back at all the sacrifices I had to make just to survive, and I have this anxious aggrievement. I have a neurotic yearning to have my parade. Where the fuck is my parade? But, like, then there's the problem with aggrievement, because, like, in some ways, I've gotten my parade. I had the opportunity to be TikTok famous, at least up until this week. I get to be a woman, which is an impossible gift beyond what my imagination was at many points in my life. And for the first time in nearly a decade, I'm approaching food and housing security. And yet none of that is, like, capable of addressing my existential dissatisfaction. In fact, in some ways, the more you get, the bigger the hole gets, because there's always that raging question of, why did I get this sooner? This brings me to the question of confronting age. I'm a quote-unquote punk mom inside of a small teen punk community in New York City, and first of all, that's an outlet for the aggrievement, because if I can't have the childhood that I'm entitled to, I might as well listen to these kids in the way that I deserve to be listened to as a child. Also, I've been doing this for years, and so it lets me see the politics of age gets demonstrated in front of me. As I see these kids age in front of me, as they go from 15 to 16 and transform the creative project that is themselves with their maturity. But then doing this for so long, I noticed that when they come quote-unquote adults at the age of 18 or 19, there's this developmental process that kicks in where they stop listening, and they don't start listening again until they hit their late 20s. And it's beautiful when it comes to the teens in my life, but that same phenomenon is a little problematic when it comes to another community I'm involved in, which is the adult trans community, where I'm around a bunch of entitled, snot-nosed 24-year-olds. Because of the political violence of AIDS and the closet, the median age of your average trans person in New York City is very, very, very young. And because of that, there are so many moments where I'll look around the room and realize with sheer terror that I'm the oldest one. I'm the token intergenerational figure. I'm the lone survivor. And I'm in my late 30s, and so from my lived experience and knowledge, I can see just how much shaky ground this community is built on top of. This beautiful explosion of trans expression is written in blood. I try to explain to these kids that every single time we walk down the street and we're not bashed, that's a privilege built on a pile of dead bodies and shaking scared survivors who came before us. And every time I say it, they'll stare at me like a dog being shown a card trick and check their Instagram infographics to verify that I'm right. Now, my #1 rule in community organizing is that I speak in yellow lights and not red lights. This is a dilemma, not a complaint, because Phil Leotardo's #1 weakness was that he could never forget it, kid. It's Chinatown. A while back, I was at a party of the trans famous Eli Ehrlich, known for inventing the unicorn thing.
Gender unicorn.
Okay, I don't care. And like at this party, I was significantly older than everybody there by at least 12 years. So I like to do this bit with very, very young people where I ask them to describe to me 9/11 because I think it's incredibly funny. And I did it to this one 18-year-old trans kid, and his response, he was ridiculously wrong. He was like, was there a shoe bomber? And it made me feel distressed, not because of some like never forget bullshit. How much of the overreaction to 9/11 is attached to our country's history with transphobia?
Amber, are you stealing my books again?
I'm stealing your books. Being fully conscious in the 2000s, I watched in horror as our country took our pain from 9/11 and lupined it into this militarized hypermasculinity and binary thinking. Hey, do you guys buy books?
Yes.
Great, I got a couple of books for you guys. Think of all the cultural icons that you can think of from the early 2000s. In fact, list them in your head. What do you have? You have Simple Life with Paris Hilton, Man Show, What Happened to the Dixie Chicks, Call of Duty, the Iraq War. You know, now that TikTok's going away, something funny to kind of reflect on is that me and the user World of T-Shirts, if you know him, we started doing tour guide content at exactly the same time, and I think we went on 2 different arcs. By the way, TikTok censors, this is sparkling water, it's soda, so like I can actually drink it. Now, as a white trans woman, I'm not the protagonist of suffering when it comes to the political blowback after 9/11. I would say that's mostly Muslims. But keep in mind when it comes to the approach to the Olympics, we have Caitlyn Jenner on our side, so we're at least placing in 3rd. But I'm a student tour guide. It's my job to explain to children 9/11. That's a thing that teachers ask me all the time, is to tell my own personal experience of what I saw on 9/11, and I always tell them about that, but I won't tell them about the more impactful thing I saw on 9/12. On 9/12, my entire family didn't know what to do, so we got in a minivan and we drove down Calle, and I saw throngs of waving American flags attached to deeply insecure people who were screaming an overcompensating message. And there was a little girl inside of my chest that heard the true meaning behind that message, which is that I don't belong in this system. And from that crowd emerged a person with a 2x2 piece of pine plank, and they came in and used it to install a section of the closet that I was trapped in for decades. I did 36 years in the can. I wanted a dress, I compromised. I wore a hoodie. I wanted a high femme girlfriend. I compromised. I got abusive bisexuals. And back at that party, I explained to kids this. And they looked at me like a dog being shown a card trick, and they retreated to their Instagram infographics to verify that I was right. And that brings me back to the dilemma. Phil Leotardo's biggest weakness was that he could never forget a kid. It's Chinatown. And for me, barking about kids these days is ultimately a rigged game. I think the kids these days do know that they need to listen, but also not listening is a developmental mode of independence. And I see this demonstrated every single time a 24-year-old NYU kid in the back of Metropolitan talks over me to explain why we should listen to intergenerational voices. And I have patience that most will arrive at that practice, but ultimately, I have no control over whatever they do or not. The only thing I have control over is my body and my voice. And so through force of personality, I'll scream as loud as I can to make sure that I'm heard. What I want to scream to you today is an argument back into your face. If you're watching this and reveling in the kids these days condensation, I want to ask, how many of you have ever had a conversation with an older black woman about her experiences in segregation? But of equal importance, how many of you have ever had a conversation with a kid about the childhoods they were robbed because of the political violence of COVID? And that's my call to action to you, is to go out, find a child, and have that conversation. I can't guarantee that in your entire life you'll ever be heard, but I can guarantee you'll get the second best thing. You'll be able to listen. Hi, I'm the world's first non-problematic white woman, and I have a question. Should trans women be around children? My answer might scare the crap out of you. By the way, I'm Amber, like the alert, and I was the only good tour guide in New York City. And if TikTok is really going away, this is not just my series finale, but I'm gonna call it. This is the series finale of the entire app. Everything after this is non-canon. After George Floyd, I got back into community organizing when I went to a town hall for a city council candidate who would eventually become a huge influence on me. Throughout the night, one by one, all the Brady Bunch squares slowly disappeared until it was just me and her, and we talked for 2 hours straight. At the end of it, I asked her about this inside baseball policy issue that I felt very adamantly about, and within 6 minutes, she completely changed my mind. And so for the next 9 months, I canvassed for her door every day. So what I got was the chance to be close to somebody who is smarter than me at things that I'm very, very smart at. But more important than that, I saw somebody who was deep in community and how they interpreted, articulated, and crafted power. And this woman was not only adamantly pro-black, but she seemed to be obsessed with old people. And there's a question of why. Why? Well, first of all, no politician has ever gone broke betting on the electoral power of seniors, but she looked at age through a very, very political lens. For example, before you have an age, you have to have a race. A 70-year-old white MAGA dude in the suburbs is a different type of 70 than a black grandma in Bed-Stuy. She eventually won the election, and it fundamentally transformed my life forever in 2 ways. Number one, I became a quote-unquote punk mom doing supportive work inside of this small teen punk community in New York City. My reasoning is that if old people are very important, young people are the upside-down version of old people with completely overlapping forms of political disenfranchisement. My 2 favorite black feminists is the author Bell Hooks and the stand-up comedian Doug Stanhope. And by a weird coincidence, in both of their works, they say the exact same phrase. Children are the most oppressed class. And doing all this community work with kids, I now fully internalize that sentiment to a reflexive level. Because watching as these kids, as they go through their struggles, I now realize that before you have a race or class, you have an age. No matter how affluent a kid is or not, you can never have enough wads of cash to throw in front of you when your dad decides to come charging at you down a darkened hallway. This violence is created by a prevalent fiction in our society, which is that parents have ownership of their children. So in order to enfranchise and empower these children, sometimes it means challenging that fiction, which makes people nervous. Children need adults in their life that aren't their parents or attached to panoptic, surveying, institutional structures. When a child has an adult for a friend, it benefits them, a person who is subject to severe political violence. I try to twist the arms of trans adults in my life so they can join me and I can have relief from the burnout that I'm always on the cusp of. And I get a wall of internalized trans misogyny of people who are paralyzed by fear of being seen in proximity with a child, leaving me all alone. That city council election changed me in 2 ways. The second way was that it made me realize I was trans. I went full Amber in 2022 at the ascendancy of all those bigot laws being passed, such as all the book bans and trans sports bans. And to me, they seemed like a statement from the white boomer electoral power class of revenge against what they perceive as race traitorism in the wake of George Floyd. And when you look at the anti-black book bans or the anti-trans laws, there are actually 3 marginalized classes that are being targeted: black people, queer people, and children. Children are the most oppressed class. But I'm going to move the camera for a second to point it away from kids and to that explosion of trans expression that happened after COVID and the end of the Harry Benjamin rules to make a statement that might not be very popular, which is that I have contempt for the trans political culture. For example, like when all these bigot laws were being passed, I would see content creators like Erin in the Morn and people with similar tones and content to her spewing panic and casting this image as if there's an impending apocalypse, that there is a dystopia just around the corner, that we're heading towards bad times. But as a trans woman in my late 30s, the verb is wrong in that sentence. We're heading towards bad times? We're approaching a dystopia? What was the centuries of chattel slavery? What was the piles of bodies that was the political violence of AIDS and the closet? When I was in high school, my teachers did not need a don't say gay law to not say gay. I haven't seen a lot of maturity in the past 5 years in our political culture. There's that Sarah McBride, that trans woman who's in Congress. The bigots above us said that she couldn't use the bathroom, and she said, okay, that's fine. And a bunch of trans people got rightfully angry at her for capitulating, but were hypocrites. Because how many times do we make compromises in our own lives? How many times does a cashier misgender us and we say, okay, that's fine? The Gay Center rejects Cecilia. Cecilia from leadership based on her stance on Palestine, and we say, okay, that's fine. Instead, they hire an austerity CEO who does mass layoffs and leaves us 6 months without case managers, and we say, okay, that's fine. Brooklyn Community Pride Center misappropriates their funds, which makes them close their bedside location, putting a black trans organization started by Mother Latravius out on their butt. And we take a break from online arguing about the meaning of labels to say, okay, that's fine. What if we had a bigger imagination than that? What if we act up? When I was a community organizer, I was told to always end with a call to action. My final ever ask of you is that instead of getting on there and saying to protect trans kids, you instead protect trans kids. It's the last chance for the slow dance, and I said my piece to everybody else, and now I'm going to be talking to you. Like you. Like you, kid. As in January 1st. As in you play baseball. As in fatherland. As in, like, I taught you how to make video games. And this entire time on this doomed app, I had 100,000 eyes on me. And yet, every moment, the only person I was talking to was you. And I want you to know that last year, a January 1st went, and then another January 1st came. And in that year, I went through the largest struggle I ever went through in my entire life. And I survived. And that wasn't necessarily a guarantee. Like, that could have not happened. And there was a time in my life where for a very long time I told myself that I survived because of you. And what I realized in my struggle last year is that that's not fair to you. Like, I have to survive because of me. And yet, every day I wake up and I'm alive, there is so much more joy because you exist. And I want to give you the entire world, but that's not up to me. And so I'm just going to give you something I gave a lot of other people, which is I'm a tour guide that works with students, and part of the job is saying just something over and over and over again until you get it just right and just perfect. And working with these kids, I would see these beautiful, amazing students, and I would just make attempt after attempt after attempt after attempt to say, like, what I feel in my heart every time I see them. And I think after a while, I got it right. And so I'm just going to share those words with you. Like, my gift to you is saying that you deserve to be loved, and you deserve to be safe. I love you.